Coming in at number 10, Mrs. Puff killed her husband.
Hey, that's my driving teacher, Mrs. Puff.
Mrs. Puff? Oh, she's married.
Oh no, Mr. Krabs, she's single.
Mrs. Puff, SpongeBob's driving instructor and the object of Mr. Krabs' affection, she is hiding something. I found this fan theory on Reddit posted by Chengwei Yingjai, and it makes a lot of sense. Mrs. Puff's husband is here no more, but something tells me it was acrimonious or worse, murderous. Mrs. Puff just moved to Bikini Bottom, leaving some kind of past behind her. A past that she doesn't like to talk about. She also acts kind of crazy when she takes SpongeBob out for his driving lesson. She enters SpongeBob into a demolition derby as a ruse to kill him. She asks why he's still alive when he somehow isn't injured. She also runs people over with like zero remorse. She's a savage. She is great. And her husband is fish food, literally.
Moving on to number 9 now, we have KRABS the Cannibal. As far as I can tell, this theory originated on Reddit. A user suggested that perhaps Mr. Krabs is a cannibal. Not only that, the secret ingredient to his Krabby Patty is crab meat. Aside from his mother, Krabs seems to be the only crab in Bikini Bottom. Were the others served up by him to the locals? In one episode, Mr. Krabs says that he became depressed after the war. Did this lead him down a dark path of cannibalism? We also see that Plankton got half of the secret recipe but could never perfect it like Krabs did. Is it because the other half features crab meat? Something Plankton would never be able to guess. At one point he even tells Plankton that real plankton are the secret ingredient, just to scare him. Do you guys think this all adds up to KRABS the Cannibal? Next up at number 8 now, we have Nazi Germany. This is a theory first shared on Reddit by user Drake Grayson. Now they claim that there is a number of similarities between Bikini Bottom and Nazi Germany. Squidward, a failed artist who hates those who are different from him and dreams of living on Easter Island with only other squids. They say that is quite similar to Hitler, a failed artist who hated those different from him and had a dream of living in a similar homogeneous society. SpongeBob is supposed to represent all the people that Hitler wanted to get rid of in Germany. Patrick is supposed to represent the ignorance of the people who didn't notice or care about the persecution of others until it was too late. Sandy's friendship with SpongeBob and Patrick means that she's apparently America, while Mr. Krabs' bad treatment of Squidward makes him Europe, blaming Squidward for everything in the way that Europe blamed Germany for everything at the end of World War I, which paved the way for another world war. Sounds pretty crazy, but they're all crazy, so. At the number 7 spot now, we have the 7 deadly sins. In Christian teachings, the 7 deadly sins are said to be wrongdoings that bring a person closer to evil, so they're a pretty serious thing. But what's the connection there to a light-hearted cartoon like SpongeBob? Well, some say that each of the show's characters is based on one of those sins. Squidward is wrath. He hates almost everything, including his job, his neighbours, even his own life. Patrick is sloth, as evidenced by his laziness. Mrs. Puff's overindulgence of food makes her glutton. Plankton's desire to have everything Mr. Krabs has makes him envy. Mr. Krabs himself is greed, because despite having wealth and power, he wants more, often at the expense of others. Pearl's boy-crazy nature makes her lust. Sandy is pride. She thinks too highly of herself and her achievements. And who's SpongeBob? Well, perhaps he's the one that these 7 deadly sins are tempting towards evil. Moving on to number 6 now, we have psychosis. Psychosis is an abnormal condition of the mind in which sufferers struggle to ascertain what is real and what is not. Well, one theory states that Squidward seems to exhibit some of the symptoms associated with psychosis. During the Idiot Box episode, Squidward watches boxing on TV and appears to hallucinate that it's actually cardboard boxes fighting. He becomes irrationally obsessed with his own box, and the sounds that he hears are symptoms of his psychosis. Other people disagree strongly and say that Squidward simply has a good imagination. Either way, it is quite a touchy subject. Some members of the community say that it trivializes mental illness. Next up at number 5 now, we have SpongeBob is dead. Many fans of the show noticed a distinct change in SpongeBob after the end of the 3rd season. When he returned in the 4th, he seemed different. More, well, to put it one way, stupid. Whereas before he was just a bit naive, now he seemed downright dumb. Was this the same SpongeBob? Some say no. They say that between the 3rd and the 4th season, the SpongeBob movie came out, which featured his death scene, and that SpongeBob actually really did die there. When he returned to the screens for the 4th season, he was actually a clone of SpongeBob, just like how real sponges reproduce asexually. The SpongeBob from the 4th season is essentially a child, which accounts for his noticeable lack of intelligence. The real SpongeBob shriveled up and died under a lamp. Harsh. Coming in number 4 now, we have Poseidon powder. Plankton spends most of his time on the show trying to get his hands on the secret ingredient to Krabby Patties. Well, we've already talked about how it could be crab meat, but what if all the ingredients are normal, but the reason they're so addictive is because they have drugs in them? That's right, some people have a theory that Mr. Krabs spikes his food in order to get his customers hooked. Not convinced? Well, in January 2019, Twitter user Catherine Danielle shared a video of her googling to find out what the secret ingredient was. Google told her it was a pinch of King Neptune's Poseidon powder. If you look up what Poseidon powder means on Urban Dictionary, you are told it's slang for cocaine. Case closed, I'll leave that one with you. Next up at number 3 now, we have the secret box. In the Donut of Shame episode, we see SpongeBob drink a whole bottle of grog for Patrick's birthday. In SpongeBob's drunken stupor, he dances on the table, prank calls everyone he knows, and ends up passing out after saying a donut this nice could really make a guy happy. Later on in the secret box episode, we see that Patrick has been keeping an embarrassing photo of SpongeBob from a party. Fans think that it's actually a picture of drunk SpongeBob, and that he may be saving it to potentially blackmail his own friend in the future. Shady. Moving on to number 2 now, we have drugs. More drugs, I guess. You might say that the characters in SpongeBob behave strangely because they're cartoon characters. They're not supposed to be normal. Others say that all of the characters are on drugs. Some of the suggestions include SpongeBob himself being on magic mushrooms, Squidward being on medical heroin, and Patrick taking medical marijuana. And there's Mr. Krabs and Mrs. Puff, who are said to take medicinal cocaine. I think putting medical and medicinal in front of all of those is a way that the theory is acceptable to talk about, but is it believable? I don't know. What do you think? And finally, number 1 now, we have Marxism. This theory states that all the characters are related to tenets of Marxism. I'm afraid you guys are going to have to go and look up what Marxism is if you've never heard of it. I really don't have time in the last minute of the video to explain all of it. Sorry. Essentially though, Mr. Krabs is the business owner who is exploiting his workers for profit. SpongeBob and Squidward represent the proletariat. SpongeBob is the conscious one who is blindly obedient to Mr. Krabs' authority and even becomes a member of the elite when he takes over the Krusty Krab when Mr. Krab retires. Squidward attempts to form a union to go on strike with the masses. This ends up failing. These 3 characters are the main parts of the theory, but many characters have their own role in this Marxist paradigm.
Starting us off at number 10 is Patrick's leg. But the episode starts off normally and Patrick and SpongeBob go sandboarding, and as Patrick tries to do a trick, he falls and loses his leg. He lets out this shrill scream that's haunting to say the least. Patrick ends up on a wheelchair for a while and girls keep wanting to sign his cast to the dismay of SpongeBob. Either way, that night SpongeBob goes to his house and tells him he can't see those girls ever again, and then they end up fighting, after which he tells SpongeBob that he hates him. Then SpongeBob starts beating Patrick's lost leg with a rock, but the dialogue and animation at this point are not matching up. The screen then cuts to Patrick playing with Jeffrey Jellyfish before going black once again. It then cuts to a CG animation of Patrick cutting SpongeBob's stomach open with some coral and very realistic blood coming out of him. SpongeBob for some reason now is laughing maniacally at this moment before everything goes black and the sound of static gets louder and louder. Ugh, ew. Well.
Coming in at number 10, the Krusty Krab is run by ghosts. Ghouls! A simple theory but a spooky one. Some people think that Mr. Krabs' establishment is run by ghosts. Why? Because we never see anyone else other than Mr. Krabs, Squidward or SpongeBob working at the Krusty Krab, and sometimes all 3 are elsewhere in Bikini Bottom, so who is running the fast food outlet? Ghosts! That's whom. According to Ranker, they are a specific type of ghosts, the ghosts of former fry cooks. Good, nice work if you can get it. You're welcome. Coming in at number 8, Squidward is dead or in purgatory. No show is worth its salt without a solid they're all dead theory. Am I right? It seems that Squidward in theory died in an episode called SB129 from season 1. In the episode, Squidward is frozen for 2,000 years, finds a time machine and is transported to a place known simply as Nowhere. The theory says that Nowhere is purgatory. There is a whole 1,000-word Reddit post on this and a link to it in the sources if you want to read it for yourself. But to surmise, the Redditor says that instead of sending Squidward back, it creates a copy of him to send to his time, meaning that there's still a version of him out there stuck in purgatory forever. I know that we don't really like Squidward, but like, that kinda sucks for him. Coming in at number 7, we have the thick Patrick theory. I guess less scary as in like, but more scary as in, ugh. I don't know about this one. People have been describing Patrick Star as thick for a while, meaning, you know, like juicy. Gifts like this, taken from the show, absolutely don't help because I see a pair of juicy doubles there. Anyway, it seems that a starfish with a voluptuous booty went viral on Twitter when tweeter Baby Shuju sent out this picture. They said they found a thick starfish in the aquarium of the Pacific in Long Beach, California. People are now circling back to the whole bootylicious Patrick thing, saying it might be him. Honestly, I could have lived forever, all of my days without thinking about his butt. But wait, did I speak too soon? We have our next theory. How do I phrase this? Do you know what? I think that I'm just gonna come out there and say it. Coming into number 6, Spongebob is a tampon and Patrick is an anus. I don't know how to recover from that. Got a video to deliver. An article on Cracked claims as much anyway. So basically, Spongebob lives in Bikini Bottom, a wet place to say the least, and Spongebob is pretty absorbent. A premium quality in a tampon if I ever heard of one. Patrick also lives in Bikini Bottom, right next door to Spongebob, and he's a starfish, which is often used as a euphemism for anus. Patrick notably loves chocolate, and when he thinks he smells bad. Is thinking a euphemism for pooping? Then there's Mr. Krabs. Is he playing the role of pubic lice? Have we gone too far? No, we haven't, because I haven't yet mentioned Gary. Gary! Why does he meow? Can anyone else think of a name for a cat which is also used as a name for a lady's nether region? Also, the underside of a snail. Actually, do you know what? I'm just gonna leave that one right there. Coming into number 5, Spongebob received a brain injury as a result of emptying his mind. In a season 3 episode, Squilliam Returns, we see Spongebob's brain office. Spongebob is asked to empty his mind. Basically, it all goes down because Squidward tells the whimsical Sponge that in order to succeed as a waiter, he has to clear his mind of, I quote, everything that doesn't have to do with fine dining and breathing. So he took that pretty literally. Spongebob's mind is metaphorically portrayed as an office, and it's operated by smaller Spongebobs. They have clipboards, it's very official. Their boss's assistant tells them that he's just got an order in, dump everything that isn't about fine dining, so that's what they do. Long story short, he is rendered completely blank and unable to function. The episode actually ends without a resolution. Spongebob is still utterly void, a shell of a person. By the next episode though, he is back to normal. Or is he? Some say that Spongebob received a brain injury as a result of the brain wiping, and that is why he is so useless in forthcoming series. Other people say that he is paralyzed from there on out, and everything else is happening inside his own mind. Another classic theory. Coming into number 4, they're all mentally ill. What say you, internet? They're all crazy. That's what. Spongebob shows signs of neurosis and anxiety. Squidward is a narcissist. Patrick is bipolar. Mr. Krabs is a psychopath. Plankton is a sociopath. Gosh, where was he last year when sociopath was trending? Heavy. A sociopath piece of plankton. Like, honestly, who knew that that was possible? It kind of makes me see the sea in a much scarier way. I'm like kind of scared of fish, low-key anyway, but a psychopathic fish? Never going in the ocean again, that's what. Coming in at number 3, Mr. Krabs is a murderer. In Danny's previous list, he discussed that Mr. Krabs might be a cannibal who puts crab meat into his much famed Krabby Patties, but is there another ingredient? The good people of the internet, specifically the good people of Reddit, have been theorizing that Mr. Krabs actually puts people, well, I guess not people but fish in his burgers. Fish are his friends and his associates. The theory goes that Pearl's mother is the secret ingredient in the Krusty Krab's most popular menu item. It is said that he killed Mama Pearl and then took in her orphan daughter to raise her as meat for when her mum's supply runs out. So she's either a sperm whale or a beluga whale, but either way they can weigh over 100,000 pounds, so that really is a lot of meat if stored properly. Also, it could keep the Krusty Krab in business for a long time, and then when it does run out, well, there's Pearl, fully grown. Ugh. Coming in at number 2, SpongeBob is the devil. I was waiting for this one to pop up. This isn't so much of a theory as it is a genuine belief by some alt-right Christians. I came across a letter written in June 2006 published in the Staten Island Advance. It was then posted online, much to the amusement of a reader, so have a listen to what they have to say. Now the title of the letter written into the newspaper was "Seemingly Innocent Show is Spawn of the Devil." They continue. By the way, here's a screenshot of the article so you can read along with me. As a Christian who attends church every day, I am appalled at what I have come to know as the downfall of society, an evil little show called SpongeBob SquarePants. This show centers around a blasphemous sponge who sets a quote-unquote good example by running around nude all day and working in a fast food restaurant. Plus, when he's running around completely naked, he is not anatomically correct. The sponge's little friend Patrick is a star, which I believe to be a pentagram. Also, his full name is Patrick Star. It's an anagram for a certain Pharaoh in the Bible named Tars Ricktap. Also, Patrick Star has 11 letters, plus P backwards is a 9, which makes 9/11. It seems like the friendly fish is a devil worshipper. SpongeBob SquarePants is a show that I have recently discovered, and I know that it is why violent crimes exist. I, being a good Christian, am standing up for Jesus and putting this evil show down. Please publish this letter so we can all be saved. Signed, Samantha West. Sam. Moment of silence for Sam. Finally, coming into number 1, conversely, SpongeBob is a god. Take that, Sam West. So there's an episode in season 1 where SpongeBob is turned into a god by the Roman god Neptune. Weirdly, this gives Spongy B pecs, which is pretty unsettling to watch. Even though SpongeBob doesn't fulfill the task set by Neptune, we never actually see him turned back into a mortal. Or wait, that's not right. I guess, like, a sentient sponge? Redditor R. Bidimi Industries thinks that since that moment, SpongeBob has been a god. They cite the fact that he can seemingly create life from nothing, as he does when he blows a bubble in human shape to keep him company, and that bubble comes to life. He's also able to manipulate and create the impossible. For example, he turns a rock into a car, which is kind of like a modern day water to wine situation. And it seems like he really does have divine powers. Oh, and people also seem to really like him even though he's a bit of a tool. So, is SpongeBob a god? If so, are we all doomed? I'm gonna go with yes.
Starting off at number 10 now, we have the Nukes. Now to many people, Bikini Bottom is just a cheeky reference to bikinis and, well, bottoms, I guess. To those of you that are into their history though, that name may ring a bell. Between 1946 and 1958, during the Cold War, the US government detonated 67 nuclear weapons on some islands in the Pacific. The islands were called Eniwetok and Bikini. The US government removed 167 people from Bikini so that they could test their nukes there, including the detonation of Bravo, which was 1,000 times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb. When the residents were returned to the island in the 1970s, they had to be removed once again after ingesting food with radioactive material in it. The theory is that Bikini Bottom is near to the real island of Bikini Atoll, and that all of the characters are the results of twisted genetic mutations. That would certainly explain the talking sponge.
Coming in at number 9 is the Bootleg episode. This episode itself is a mix of static, random colours and black screens. The audio isn't even intelligible, it's heavily distorted and includes some metallic screeches here and there. The tape itself was found by a group of 5 teens back in December of 2004. They were hanging around the back of a mental institution and they happened to find it in its bin. A, why were they hanging behind a mental institution, and B, why were they rifling through the bin? Maybe they deserve to find the tape, that's all I'm gonna say. The tape itself shows SpongeBob slouched over in a dark room and his eyes are bloodshot like he's been crying. 10 seconds later, he takes a bottle of pills from a nearby table while the screen is flickering between light and dark colours. The screams of children come on in the background before going silent as SpongeBob swallows all the pills. He drops to the floor holding his stomach and then starts frothing at the mouth before vomiting all over himself and eventually dying before the screen goes black. No one knows where the tape is now, and the teens that found it are also nowhere to be found. 2 of them committed suicide, 1 disappeared, and the other 2, well, God knows. Maybe only SpongeBob knows. At number 8, we have Squidward's Suicide Part 1. Now, this is probably the most famous Lost SpongeBob episode, hailing from none other than Creepypasta. The story is shared by someone who claimed to be an intern at Nickelodeon Studios back in 2005. The person worked with the editors and animators, and they always reviewed the new episodes before they aired. Sometimes the editors would just put up mock titles as a joke, and one day they saw the title card Squidward's Suicide. Now, thinking it was nothing more than a morbid joke, they decided to play it. Now, it showed Squidward finishing his concert, and then the frames started repeating themselves. The crowd starts booing Squidward maliciously, and it wasn't just the light cartoon-like booing, it was proper booing. You can even see SpongeBob booing the sponge that doesn't have a single mean bone in his body, or sponge, or whatever he is. Squidward is visibly scared, and everyone at this point has very realistic red eyes. We then see Squidward crying on his bed, but the sounds were split with what sounded like laughing and then just screeching. And then the frames kept glitching. Filling our number 7 slot is Squidward's Suicide Part 2. Now, the lead animation editor rewound the scene frame by frame and saw a picture of a dead boy with an extremely mangled, bloody face. One of his eyes were hanging out and his stomach was cut with his intestines laying beside him. Horror took the room as the frames go back to Squidward, now crying blood. That went on for about 20 more seconds before the screen glitched again and the editor rewound once again. This time it was a little girl in a pool of blood. She was naked except for wearing underwear, and her eye was popped out just like the first boy. Her entrails were piled on top of her, and an intern in the room actually ran out at that point needing to vomit. It's honestly too much. Tears and blood continued to run down Squidward's face, and then all of a sudden the sound of a deep demonic laugh came and lasted 5 frames. When that was rewound, they could see a boy with his entrails being pulled out by somebody's hand. Again, one eye was popped out, and in the end, the last shot is Squidward staring at you with a deep voice saying, "Do it," before he puts a shotgun in his mouth and shoots himself. That's a lot to take in. Now, obviously it's a creepypasta, it's probably fake, but still. Now, at number 6 is the yard sale, shared by an anonymous dad. He said he went to a yard sale a few years ago with his 2 sons, and they ended up buying an old box set of Spongebob SquarePants. That night, the dad put on the episode for the kids for it to start off as normal. Who lives in a pineapple under the sea? SpongeBob SquarePants, etc, etc, you get the gist. However, 5 minutes into the episode, the screen went staticky, and the only sound you could hear was the sound of someone running their nails down a chalkboard. Now I have goosebumps just thinking about that sound, and I didn't even hear it. I just hate it. Then some dialogue came of SpongeBob crying, but it was super distorted. He was saying, "You shouldn't have seen this," over and over again. Then Mr. KRABS comes on screen with his claws cut off and a countdown next to him. He starts counting down from 10 while saying, "If you turn off the tape now, none of you will survive." The kids started crying, the dad was freaking the hell out, and when the timer finally got to 0, the lights in the house went out. When they came back on, both his kids were gone. Coming in at number 5 is Sandy's Revenge. Back in 2006, this episode of SpongeBob apparently aired at 1:34 a.m. It started off with SpongeBob depressed as hell walking to Sandy's tree dome, and his eyes are bloodshot, so we can assume he's been crying. After standing outside her door for 5 minutes, he knocks, and at the 5th knock, Sandy opens the door, looking equally as sad. She lets him in, saying thanks for coming, and just as SpongeBob is about to open his mouth, Sandy lunges at him, strangling him to death. After she's sure he's dead, she ties his body to a wooden board before throwing it out of her house. Apparently, on the edge of a mental breakdown now, Sandy starts screaming as she starts trashing her own house. In the background, in a plot twist turn of events, we see Squidward lying on the ground, and we don't know if he's dead or not. Then he suddenly gets up and runs at her with a fork, but Sandy dodges him and chokes him to death. Sandy, who hurt you? At number 4 is The Birthday. This episode comes from someone who's looking for SpongeBob torrents online and downloaded this one titled Sorry, SpongeBob. It starts with Squidward playing his clarinet as Patrick opens his door saying it's SpongeBob's birthday and that we're going to surprise him. Squidward then asks who's invited before saying they can't all surprise him. Patrick then says they'd love to, it's going to be so much fun, and then Squidward shouts no angrily before kicking him out, which honestly isn't that out of the blue since Squidward is just annoyed all the time. The screen then goes to black before going to SpongeBob's dark house with all the birthday guests waiting and whispering inside. When he walks in, the lights go on and everyone yells surprise, but the shock is so huge that SpongeBob screams and punches himself in the chest, causing himself to choke. Hyper-realistic blood starts pouring out of the holes in his body before his body finally hits the ground. His friends start screaming and running out of the house as Squidward comes in with bloodshot eyes. All he says is, "Patrick, I told you," before the screen cuts to his funeral. Filling an on-3 is SCARBOB, DEATHPANTS. Now this person was trying to find a VHS tape for his little sister when he randomly came upon one labelled SBDP. It ended up being a SpongeBob VHS, and when he put it in, it started off with SpongeBob holding a butter knife as Patrick confronted him. Squidward had human eyes at this point photoshopped onto him as he lay on the ground. It then shows SpongeBob coming out of his house, but his house was covered in cuts and bloodstains because apparently pineapples bleed too. The hand that usually pulls his pants off is instead stabbed by SpongeBob. He cuts the hand into tiny bits and pieces before eating it. He then goes back inside his house to his bathtub, but instead of water inside it was body parts and blood. He then soaks up all the bloody water with the body parts before full on eating them. The boy watching ended up vomiting, and before shutting off the tape he heard Tom Kenny's voice saying, "You're next, kid." Tom Kenny being the guy who voiced SpongeBob. Now at number 2 is the Camp Coral Massacre Part 1. So SpongeBob has a spin-off show called Camp Coral that is set to air later this year. Some have managed to get the official reel of the show and decide to download it onto their laptop. It started off with a slowed down version of SpongeBob's campfire song before the title Camp Coral Massacre came on screen. It then cut to the sign outside the campsite as fog began to roll in the darkness, and the camera zooms into a younger SpongeBob asleep on top of a bunk bed. Patrick is at the bottom and they both wake up to the sound of heavy footsteps outside their cabin. They decide to investigate, but out of nowhere an image of a woman with her head split open flashes on the screen. As the two go outside, the fog gets worse and SpongeBob bumps into someone thinking it's Patrick. But Patrick's behind him, and after shining the light in front of them, they see this fish holding a hatchet. Dun dun dun. And finally, at number 1 is the Camp Coral Massacre Part 2. Now obviously at this point they run away screaming for their lives as the fish chases after them. The other campers wake up and see what's going on as the fish heads for all of them instead. He hits one in the head as blood squirts on the campers around them. Campers start getting evacuated and the screen cuts to SpongeBob and Patrick hiding under their beds, clearly scared as anyone would be if a fish was wielding a hatchet. As the screaming dies down outside, Patrick gets up to look outside to see piles of bodies on top of each other. Thinking the fish is gone, he turns to SpongeBob to tell him the coast is clear, but suddenly starts spewing blood and falls to the ground. The fish hatcheted him in the back, and despite trying to escape, he grabs SpongeBob. Crying and begging for his life, the fish hits SpongeBob repeatedly in the face until he's unrecognizable and the fish is covered in blood. The last shot is showing the utter anarchy that befell the camp. The end.